I'm Evan Carter, and I never believed in paranoia until I moved into this place. My roommate, Lila Burns, laughed at the creaking floors and flickering lights, but I can't laugh anymore. Last night I found a hidden camera inside the vent, pointed directly at my bed. Now the footage shows more than just MIT shows someone else moving in the dark. I always believed my apartment was the safest place in the world. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it gave me a sense of comfort that nothing else could. The walls were thin, and I could often hear the muffled laughter of the couple upstairs or the occasional barking dog from next door. But I told myself those sounds meant I wasn't alone. There was life all around me, and I felt secure knowing I had my own little space carved out in the middle of it. My days followed a routine, simple and predictable, until the little things began to change. At first they were so small I thought I was imagining them. A glass on the table that I swore I had placed in the sink the night before. A chair that was pushed slightly away from the dining table. A blanket folded differently than I remembered. I brushed it all off, convincing myself I was just tired, that maybe I was too distracted scrolling on my phone or watching videos to notice. Still, the thoughts nagged at me, little whispers of doubt that clung to me no matter how hard I tried to push them away. Then one night, lying in bed, the unease grew heavier. The silence in the apartment didn't feel natural anymore. It was too still, as if the air itself was listening. I remember staring into the corners of my room, my eyes adjusting to the shadows, waiting for something to shift. Nothing moved, but I couldn't shake the tension in my chest. Eventually, exhaustion forced me into a shallow, restless sleep. But when I woke up the next morning, I felt like I hadn't rested at all. The worry followed me into the day. I wanted to laugh at myself for being paranoid, but my nerves wouldn't calm. That's when I decided to test myself. I set my phone to record a video in the living room while I went out to the store. It was a silly idea, I thought. I didn't expect anything to happen. But maybe if I saw the footage later, I'd finally believe that my mind was playing tricks on me. When I came home an hour later, I went straight for the phone. My hands trembled as I pressed play. For the first 20 minutes, there was nothing, just an empty living room. Sunlight slipping through the blinds, the kind of normal scene I had been hoping for. Then, the hallway door moved. Slowly, too slowly. The handle turned, the door cracked open, and a figure stepped out. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The figure wasn't hurried or clumsy. They moved with unsettling calm. As if this was routine, as if they belonged there. They walked into the kitchen, opened a cabinet, and pulled out a glass. I stared in disbelief as they filled it with water, drank, and placed it neatly back, like they had done it before. But the part that made my stomach twist was what came next. The figure turned their head directly toward the camera. They didn't rush to hide or run. They simply stood there, silent and unmoving, as if they knew I would be watching later. As if this moment was meant for me. Then, just as calmly, they walked back down the hallway and closed the door. The video ended with the same stillness it had started with. I sat frozen, clutching the phone so tight my fingers hurt. I replayed the footage over and over, trying to make sense of it, trying to catch a glimpse of their face, but the angle never gave me enough. All I could tell was that someone had been inside my apartment, and I hadn't heard a single sound. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop imagining footsteps in the hallway. I couldn't stop replaying the way the figure had turned toward the camera, as if staring straight through it. My chest ached with the weight of dread, my ears straining for the faintest noise. Sleep never came easy, and when it finally did, it was restless and uneasy. The next morning, I watched the video one more time, desperate for details I had missed, and then I noticed it. The camera angle had shifted slightly during the recording, tilted just a few inches to the left. I hadn't placed it that way. Someone had touched it. Someone had known it was there. I couldn't think about anything else for the rest of the day. Every time I glanced around my apartment, I imagined shadows lingering just out of view. Someone waiting for me to lower my guard. I considered going to the police, but the idea seemed weak even before I finished forming it. What could I tell them? That a blurry shape walked through my home, drank some water, and left. There were no signs of forced entry, no damage, no theft. It would sound like paranoia, and I didn't want to see the disbelief in their faces when I tried to explain, but the truth pressed against me like a weight. I couldn't ignore it. Someone had been inside, and if they had done it once, what was stopping them from coming back? That thought clung to me every time I turned a corner or opened a closet door. My apartment no longer felt like mine. I needed proof, more than what I had already captured. I ordered a small hidden camera online, one disguised as a simple digital clock. When it arrived, I placed it on the bookshelf in my living room, angled so it could see most of the apartment. If anyone tried to come back, I would catch them. I told myself it was a precaution, a step toward taking control again. But deep down, I already suspected I wasn't going to like what I found. The first 2 nights gave me nothing, just long, uneventful hours of silence recorded in grainy detail. I forced myself to watch every second, my eyes burning, my stomach tightening with both relief and disappointment. I almost convinced myself that maybe the first video had been a fluke, some strange trick of timing, maybe even a prank. But on the 3rd night, the footage changed everything. I went to bed just after midnight, leaving the camera to watch over the empty living room. When I woke the next morning, I rushed to review it. The hours crawled by in silence at first, nothing moving, nothing shifting. Then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., the hallway door creaked open again. My heart raced as I watched the figure emerge. Their movements were deliberate, steady, like they had all the time in the world. They didn't hesitate or fumble. They knew exactly where they were going. They crouched down by the couch, reaching beneath it with practiced ease, and pulled out a small object. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath caught in my throat. It was a black box with a faint blinking light, a camera. I felt sick. Someone had hidden it there long before I ever suspected. They had been watching me from inside my own home, watching me do everything when I thought I was alone. I couldn't stop the rush of nausea as I thought about the countless nights I had sat in that living room, scrolling on my phone, eating dinner, or even dozing off, never realizing I was being recorded. The figure wiped the lens with a cloth, adjusted its angle, and slid it neatly back under the couch, as if nothing had happened. Then they turned their head toward the hallway, listening. After a long pause, they did something that froze me to the core. They turned toward my bedroom door. The figure tilted their head slightly, holding still like an animal scenting the air. For nearly a full minute, they just stood there, unmoving, as if listening for the sound of my breathing on the other side. My chest tightened so much I could barely inhale as I imagined myself sleeping while they lingered, only a thin door separating us. Finally, they retreated into the hallway. The door shut gently behind them and the apartment fell silent again. I sat staring at the screen long after the footage ended, unable to tear my eyes away. It wasn't just the camera under the couch. The figure knew where to look. They didn't hesitate because they had put it there themselves, which meant there could be more. My skin prickled as I turned to look around my apartment. Every object suddenly felt suspicious. Every surface might be hiding another eye. I walked slowly toward the bookshelf where I had hidden my clock camera, and that's when I saw it. A tiny square of black tape on the edge of the shelf, so small I had overlooked it before. I peeled it back with trembling fingers. Underneath, gleaming faintly in the light, was another lens staring back at me. I dropped the tape, my whole body shaking. This wasn't just someone sneaking in once or twice. This was something planned, deliberate, and ongoing. Someone had filled my apartment with hidden eyes, and I had never noticed until now. And if there were cameras here, how many more had I missed? I tore through my apartment like a storm, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. The hidden lens behind the tape had shattered any illusion of safety I still had. I had been living in a cage built by someone else, a cage lined with eyes. Every object suddenly became a threat, every blinking light, every shadow in the corner. I started searching with shaking hands, pulling furniture away from the walls, unscrewing fixtures, tearing open vents. The first place I checked was the smoke detector. I twisted it off the ceiling and my breath caught when I saw a tiny black circle wedged inside another camera. I pulled it out and threw it onto the floor. My hands were slick with sweat, trembling as I moved on to the next spot. The air vent in the hallway held another. Behind a loose panel near the bathroom sink another. Even inside the light fixture above my bed, a blinking lens stared down at me like an unblinking eye. By the time I was done, I had counted 7 of them, each one small, precise, and silent. My living space wasn't just infiltrated, it was completely mapped. I sat in the middle of my living room, surrounded by a pile of black devices, my breath shallow. The realization sank deeper with every passing second. This wasn't about theft. This wasn't about money. Whoever was doing this didn't take anything, they only watched. I couldn't stop imagining them sitting somewhere, staring at monitors, knowing every detail about me, how I moved, how I slept, what I looked like when I cried. The thought made me feel stripped bare, like my skin had been peeled off. I tried to calm my racing mind, but every sound in the apartment felt amplified. The creak of the pipes, the hum of the refrigerator, even my own breathing seemed too loud, like it might draw someone closer. I stayed awake that entire night, the lights blazing, a kitchen knife clutched tight in my hand. My eyes darted from one corner to the next, waiting for a shadow to move. Once, in the middle of the night, I swore I heard scratching in the walls, a faint, slow drag, like something crawling through the space between the drywall. I pressed my ear to the cool plaster, straining to listen, but it went silent again, leaving me with nothing but my own heartbeat echoing in my head. By morning, I was exhausted, trembling from lack of sleep, but I had an idea. If someone was coming here regularly, I needed to catch them while I was still inside. I set my phone camera up in my bedroom, facing my bed. Then I climbed under the covers and pretended to sleep. My heart beat like a drum in my ears as I forced my breathing to slow. Minutes stretched into hours. Every creak of the building made my muscles tighten. I tried to stay awake, but exhaustion dragged me down. When I woke, daylight filtered through the blinds. My phone was no longer where I had left it. Instead of pointing toward the bed, it was flat on the nightstand, facing the ceiling. I hadn't moved it. Dread flooded me as I picked it up with numb fingers. I opened the footage, my vision blurring. At 2:44 a.m., the bedroom door creaked open. The figure slipped in silently. Their face was hidden in the shadows again, but their body was close enough to touch. I watched myself sleeping, my mouth slightly open, completely unaware. The figure moved closer, step by slow step, until they were standing over me. They leaned down, their gloved hand brushing my hair back from my forehead with a strange, almost tender gesture. My stomach twisted as the image played out. Then they bent closer, their mouth only inches from my ear. The footage had no sound, but I could see their lips moving. They were whispering something to me as I slept. I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen. It felt like my heart stopped. After a moment, the figure straightened, watching me for a long, frozen second before turning and slipping out of the room. The door shut without a sound. I sat there shaking, the phone slipping from my fingers onto the bed. They had been inches from me, hovering over me while I slept, whispering things I couldn't hear. The image burned into my mind, and though I had no memory of what they said, I woke up with the feeling of something cold lodged deep inside my chest, like their words had crawled into me and stayed there. The day after watching that footage, I could barely function. My body moved, but my mind felt disconnected, heavy with dread. Every surface in the apartment seemed tainted, like invisible fingerprints were smeared across everything I touched. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think clearly. My entire focus was on the memory of that figure leaning over me, whispering into my ear, leaving behind words I could not remember but somehow felt inside me like a sickness. I told myself I should leave the apartment, but the thought of stepping outside filled me with as much fear as staying inside. What if they were waiting? What if they followed me in plain sight, blending into the crowd, smiling at me while I remained clueless? No, I couldn't leave, not yet. I had to understand what was happening. That night, I decided not to sleep. I turned off every light and sat in the darkness with a knife in my hand, my back pressed into the corner of my bedroom. I wanted to catch them. I wanted to finally see them with my own eyes, not through the cold distance of a screen. My heart pounded with every passing hour, and the silence pressed against me like a physical weight. At 3 a.m., I heard it, the faint, unmistakable sound of my front door unlocking. The click echoed through the apartment, sharp and deliberate. My body stiffened. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Footsteps followed, soft but steady, crossing the living room with the same calm confidence I had seen on the videos. They weren't rushing, weren't worried about being caught. They knew exactly what they were doing. The sound grew closer, each step measured, until it reached the hallway. The floorboards creaked under their weight, and my body screamed at me to run, to hide, to do anything but sit frozen in place. I couldn't. My limbs were locked, as if the sound itself had pinned me down. The shadow appeared under the crack of my bedroom door, long stretched unnaturally by the angle of the light outside. I thought I saw fingers twitching against the floorboards, as if reaching for the handle. I gripped the knife so tightly my knuckles burned, but I couldn't make myself move. Then came the silence. A silence so complete that it felt louder than noise. The shadow didn't shift. The handle didn't turn. I sat there trembling, every second dragging into eternity. And then, a new sound. A faint metallic click from above me. My head tilted back slowly, dread pouring through me like ice water. The smoke detector above my bed blinked red once, then went dark. Another click followed, softer this time, like something mechanical being reset. I couldn't move. My skin crawled with the realization that someone was controlling it, that the blinking light wasn't random, it was intentional. Whoever was in my apartment wasn't just walking the floors anymore. They were already inside my room, already watching from above. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady, knife clutched close to my chest. My breath came shallow, my eyes darting from the ceiling to the door, back and forth, trapped between two threats. I listened for the footsteps again, but there was nothing. Just silence and the faint electrical hum of the detector. Hours passed like that. I never opened the door. I never moved from my spot except to press myself tighter into the corner, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the figure to reveal itself. But nothing came. When daylight finally bled into the room, I realized I had survived the night, but only just. My apartment no longer felt like a place I could endure. The safety I once believed in had completely dissolved. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a trap, a stage where I was forced to perform while someone else pulled the strings. And as I sat there in the daylight, knife slipping from my hand, exhaustion overwhelming me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stayed awake the whole night after all. That at some point, for just a few minutes, I had fallen asleep without realizing it, because when I finally looked at my phone, lying beside me on the bed, the camera was already open, and the lens was pointed straight at me. I woke to the harsh glare of daylight streaming through the blinds. My body felt heavy, my eyes raw from hours of strain and fear. For a moment, I almost convinced myself the night had been a fever dream, some trick my mind had played after days of paranoia and sleeplessness. But then I saw my phone lying beside me, the camera app still open, as if it had been recording. I couldn't remember turning it on. I couldn't even remember picking it up. My stomach churned as I unlocked the screen. A new file sat in my gallery, time-stamped just a few hours earlier. My hands shook as I opened it. The video showed me sleeping, the angle far too close to have been recorded from where I'd left my phone. The lens hovered directly above my face, as though someone had held it inches from my skin while I was unconscious. I stared at my own image, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, unaware of what loomed above me. Then, the figure appeared. Not from the door this time, not from the hallway. They leaned into frame from somewhere above, their face filling the shot. For the first time, I saw them clearly. Their skin was pale, almost gray, stretched tight over sharp bones. Their eyes were dark hollows, too deep, too wide, and their grin cut across their face in a way that felt unnatural, too deliberate. They didn't speak at first. They just stared into the lens, into me, as though the camera was nothing more than a window between us. And then their mouth began to move. Their whisper was faint, distorted, but it was audible this time. "I've always been here." The words crawled through me, colder than ice always, not just days or weeks. Longer I tried to stop the video, but my hand refused to obey. I kept watching as the figure leaned closer to my sleeping form. Their lips brushed my ear in the recording, just as they had in the earlier footage. But this time, I heard the whisper clearly. "Wake up." The screen cut to black. I dropped the phone onto the bed, my chest heaving. My gaze darted around the room, every shadow shifting, every surface alive with menace. I scrambled up, pulling open the closet, tearing through the bathroom, searching for signs of entry, for some trace that the figure had been there. Everything looked untouched, but that didn't matter anymore. They didn't need doors or locks. They were already inside. I stumbled back into the bedroom, heart pounding, and froze. My mirror caught my attention. A faint red glimmer blinked near the edge of the glass. At first I thought it was just a reflection, a trick of the light, but when I stepped closer I saw it clearly, a tiny pinhole in the surface, blinking softly like the cameras I had already found. My reflection stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed, but I couldn't tear my gaze from that faint light. It was a lens, watching me from the other side of the glass, a hidden passage, a hollow wall. I pressed my ear to the mirror, desperate for answers, and swore I heard faint breathing from beyond it. I stumbled back, almost tripping over the pile of cameras I had already ripped from the apartment. My breath came in ragged gasps, and the thought bloomed in my head, uncontrollable, undeniable. I wasn't alone in this apartment. Maybe I had never been alone. I snatched my phone again, fumbling with the camera and pointed it toward the mirror. I expected to see my reflection staring back. Instead, what filled the screen made my blood turn to ice. The reflection wasn't me, it was the figure, standing where I should have been, wearing my clothes, tilting its head at the same angle, smiling that awful two-eyed grin. It mimicked me perfectly, but the longer I looked, the clearer the differences became. Its eyes were deeper, darker, hungrier. Its lips moved silently, forming words I couldn't hear. I dropped the phone and staggered backward, unable to breathe. When I dared to glance at the mirror again, the figure was gone. Only my reflection remained, trembling, pale, horrified. I wanted to run, to flee the apartment forever, but my body refused to move. My legs felt rooted to the floor, as though the ground itself wanted to keep me here. The silence pressed in again, thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint buzz of my phone on the bed. A new notification flashed across the screen. Another video file. No sender, no explanation, just the file, waiting to be opened. I couldn't bring myself to watch it. I couldn't touch the phone. I knew if I did, I'd see something worse, something I couldn't ever forget. But even as I refused to move, the phone opened the file on its own. The screen lit up with the camera app, recording in real time. It showed me, standing in the bedroom, frozen in terror, but I wasn't holding the phone.